Today, I'm going to talk about kind of looking at the sales process from a high level as a psychological process. And one of the things that I'm documenting here is that there are 5 psychological pivot points in the sales process. And if you understand where you're at in the process and you understand where your customer's mind is at and what you need to move the customer to next, it will make selling a lot easier. As I said in the big book of sales, sales is the art and science of gently navigating the customer through a series of sequences and psychological pivots, starting from the resistance statement that we all hear, no, I wouldn't be interested, I already have somebody who does that for me, all the way to the close. And you turn them psychologically point by point until at the end, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and do this. They sign the contract, give you their credit card, write you the check, whatever it is that you do to close the sale. So let's talk a little bit about why we need psychological pivot points. Basically, and I was saying this in the members training yesterday, the sales process is a little bit of an unnatural process. It's a little different than how you normally communicate. And because it's different, which I'll share with you in a minute, because of this difference, in other words, you as a salesperson don't necessarily communicate the same way that your customer communicates with other people. And because of that difference, it creates a psychological tension that's built into the sales process. But that psychological tension, as I'll show you, is in the beginning. And if you can get past that psychological tension, then you'll see the process is a lot easier. So why do we need these psychological pivot points? The customer comes to a sales presentation or a sales meeting or answers the phone and you tell them what you sell. The customer wants to know what you have and they want to know what it costs. That's pretty obvious. For example, imagine you're selling stuff in a flea market. So somebody comes up in a flea market and you have a table, you have a box that's marked $1. Everything in this box is $1. Everything in this box is $5. This box is $10. And this box over here is the good stuff. It's $25. So your customer comes and talks to you and says, oh yeah, so what are you selling and how much does it cost? And you just show them the boxes. Now the sales process becomes, they're going to dig around in the $1 box, but now you're going to ask them some good questions. You're going to engage them a little bit, tell them a joke, get them comfortable. And all of a sudden they're moving to the $5 box. You ask them a few more questions, get them to feel more comfortable. Now they're at the $10 box. Your job as the salesperson is to make them feel comfortable with the process, to show them the value in the items that they're looking at and move them to the $25 box. And then, oh, by the way, what about your kids? They need presents too. Yeah, buy more $25 gifts and more and more. And you turn a $1 sale into a $250 sale. That's your skill as a salesperson. Now, if you're not good at engaging with the customer and, some couple comes over and what do you got? How much does it cost? And they don't want to talk to you and they go over and they're digging around in the $1 box, but they won't talk to you. You won't engage in a conversation with them. They'll buy something for $1 and they'll move on. But what you want to do is learn to engage people in conversation. So in the beginning of the conversation, the customer wants to, and it's just natural, they want to know what you're selling and what it costs. But you have the opposite objective. You don't necessarily want to tell them what you have and what it costs just yet. You want to know what they have and what it costs them. You want to find out more about them and their situation and their process. And it's this tension of you having to block the customer from getting what they want right away. It's that tension that makes selling really interesting and it's, by the way, the reason why most new salespeople just can't figure it out, because it's not a normal back and forth conversation. If you follow their process, if you give them the information they want without finding out what they have, you will lose the sale. It's been said, and we actually, in the members training yesterday, we actually went through a role play, and I was being particularly difficult, and I kept asking, well, what do you sell? What kind of products do you represent? How much does it cost? And the person was answering all those questions. And there's a saying in sales, the person who's asking the questions is winning the conversation. So when your customer asks you, what do you have? How much does it cost? Tell me about this. Tell me about that. You have to block that. You have to control that process and flip it and find out more about them before you just spew out what you have. Because if you follow their process, the sale is lost. Once that guy told me what he has, what it costs, all that good stuff, I didn't need him anymore. I could go shop around on my own. I didn't need him as a salesperson because he was giving me information, and that's what I needed. You have to control the process to your agenda. And that's what these 5 psychological pivot points are about. So sales is a series of pivots. Each pivot represents a new psychological state in your customer's mind. Now, I understand not everybody who watches this is cold calling. Sometimes you're dealing with warm leads. I get that. But for those people, which is the majority of salespeople who cold call or call on leads, the first thing you're going to hear from the person who answers the phone, and by the way, most people don't even answer the phone, but if they do answer the phone and you give them your little, 10-second pitch about who you are and what you sell, they're going to immediately tell you, I'm not interested. That's called the impulsive resistance. They don't know what you sell. They don't know your offer. They don't know if it's good for them. They just know they're not interested because they didn't really want to talk to you. So the first pivot is how to pivot people from, yeah, I'm not interested, or yeah, I already have somebody that helps me with that, so it wouldn't be interested. How to pivot them out of that psychological state, which is negative resistant, into a more open mindset. Well, okay, I'll give you a minute. I'll answer a question or two, but just for a minute. And that's all we need. We just need that pivot from the negative to, yeah, I'll be willing to talk to you for a minute, but make it quick. I don't have a lot of time. So all we're looking for in the very beginning is that psychological pivot. Now I have a whole series of videos. I have a YouTube training session on this. So I'm not going to go into it in great detail. You can see how it lays out in much more detail, but I call that a jujitsu flip. The customer tells you you're not interested. They're not interested. Oh, and this is the formula for the jujitsu flip. Oh, that's exactly why I'm calling. So let's use health insurance as I don't want health insurance. I already have health insurance. I'm good. I don't need it. You called me. I don't want health insurance. Well, sir, that's exactly why I'm calling. And then 2 bullet points. Most people don't realize that they have options with their health insurance. There are plans out there that are less expensive and give you better access to doctors. Bullet 1, less expensive. Bullet 2, better access to doctors. Just the other day, I helped a family save over $600 a month on their health insurance. Can I ask you, what's your zip code? See, you ask a narrow, non-threatening question. So look what just happened. The customer was about to hang up. I'm not interested. Couldn't care less about health insurance. They're about to hang up. And we did a jujitsu flip. We did that pivot. We pivoted them using this technique, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's exactly why I'm calling. Most people don't realize they have options with their marketing plan. We've helped people do marketing like this and like that. We helped a company the other day, blah, blah, blah. Can I ask you, when's the last time, how long have you been with your current marketing company? Just ask a narrow, non-threatening question. And now the customer will give you their zip code. They'll answer you, what is your typical electric bill? Oh, I usually pay about $100 a month for electric. Great. They're answering your little narrow question. So you have to have this flip scripted out, because every time you talk to someone, certainly on a cold call, but even when you follow up with leads, when you follow up with a lead, what happens is they say they're not interested, but I have all your information here. Well, yeah, I was interested yesterday, but I'm not interested today. I'm going to, list my house with my cousin real estate agent. Oh, well, that's exactly why I'm calling, sir. Most people don't realize that, here's what a realtor does. We do bullet point 1, we do bullet point 2. Here's a story about how I listed a house, made the guy an extra $500,000. Can I ask you, how long have you been in the house? Ask a very narrow question. And as soon as they answer the question, you're in. You've completed the pivot. You've completed the flip. This is the spot where 99% of new salespeople get slaughtered. They get, I'm not interested. I already have somebody for that. Oh, okay. Well, if you're interested, I'm going to give you my name. And yeah, sure. Give me your name and number. I'll call you back. Yeah, of course I will. Right. And they just get slaughtered like that. And all you have to know is the simple jujitsu flip. That's exactly why I'm calling. And now if they answer your narrow questions, you're in the next psychological state, but we're not done yet. The next pivot point is a customer who's in the mindset of, yeah, okay, tell me what you have. You have 1 minute. Yeah, here's my zip code. Here's this. I pay $100, whatever your narrow question is. They answer the question. Now what? You have 1 minute. Go ahead. The next pivot, which I talked about, I believe I talked about it last week, is taking somebody from this answering narrow questions to answering broad questions. So the pivot involves them starting to cooperate by giving you a little bit of information, but they're still not really ready to hear everything you have to say. And you want to pivot to opening them up to talking more about their situation, their circumstances, their problem, their need, whatever the thing, you know what I'm talking about. Try to get them to explain what's going on in their lives. So the pivot involves pivoting from a series of narrow questions or even one narrow question to broader questions. Now, again, this is where most people fail. They get one or two pieces of information. Okay, your zip code, your ages, let me show you the health insurance. And then you just go right into your presentation without asking them anything about their background, their experiences, what's important to them, what they have now. If they had a magic wand, what would you like in the future? The whole point is to open the conversation and let them talk. Let them give you as much information as they want to give you. As I explained many, many times, when you start a conversation with a customer, the customer is holding on to, I'm going to stop my screen share here for a second. When you start a call with a customer, the customer is holding on to psychic energy. And you have to understand that when you're talking to the customer about, for example, health insurance, that's the last thing on their mind. They were doing other things. They've got their own world, their own Facebook chat. They're doing a million things. They don't really care about you. So what they're doing is they're holding on to all this psychic energy. And they say, oh, I wouldn't be interested. Well, sir, that's exactly why I'm calling. Most people don't realize they have choice with health insurance, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, what's your zip code? And then they open up slightly and they give you their zip code. And how many children do you have? And they open up a little bit more. What you really want to do is get them to open up fully, release all of their psychic energy. And it's the second pivot that gets them from resistance to opening up and sharing information. This is a really important step. And for those of you who call on leads all day or on a dialer or cold calling, whatever it is, if you're calling a lot of people, you will get to practice this over and over and over again throughout the day. And you have to understand they don't want to talk to you. Yeah, call me in 3 weeks. Whatever. Yeah, call me in a month. Yeah, perfect. Bye. Or, I'm not interested. I have somebody who, and it's called impulsive resistance. Just, okay, they give you a little bit of information. They open up ever so slightly. And now the second pivot is to move from the slight narrow questions that they're answering to start asking them broader questions until eventually they're opening up. They're releasing all of their psychic energy, all of the pressure that they're holding. And now finally they get a chance to talk about their problem. It's this opening up process that we're looking for, because when they open up to you, psychologically, they're now starting to trust you. It's a limbic response. When somebody talks, they begin to trust the person that they're talking to. They're sharing information with you. And it's that release process. In the first and second pivot, you're looking for that release process. So now you're not talking to somebody who's all jumbled up and doesn't want to talk to you. You're talking now to somebody who wants, who just wants to share information. They still want to know what you have and how much it costs. That may not have gone away, but now they've opened up and they're talking to you on the same wavelength, if that makes sense. So we want to pivot from them giving them very easy questions to answer to giving them more important questions to answer, broader questions. It would be silly for you to cold call and them telling you they're not interested. And you say, yeah, I know you're not interested, but why don't you tell me your deepest fears about, the future of your business? What's the most important? You can't do that. You have to start with narrow questions, but you can't stay on narrow questions. You have to quickly pivot to opening up to a broader conversation. So the easiest way to do that is they answer your small question and they go, yeah, but tell me what you have. Absolutely. I'll tell you exactly what I have. But I probably should ask you, what is your biggest marketing challenge for the last couple of years? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you grade yourself on your marketing or whatever it is you're selling? How happy are you with your health insurance? What's the most important thing? You can ask any question by simply using these little verbal pivots. Yeah, I'm going to tell you what I have. But, by the way, I should probably ask you, what is your deepest, darkest fear about whatever it is I'm talking about? Or you might say, sure, I'm going to share with you what we have and the pricing. You'll be an expert on that. Most people who I talk to, this is their experience. What's been your experience with health insurance or buying copper or whatever it is you sell? It doesn't really matter. It's irrelevant. The product you sell is irrelevant. It's the psychological pivot. in the customer's mind that takes them from answering like grudgingly answering a narrow question to willingly, whether they even aware of it or not, start spilling all the beans, releasing all of their psychic energy. This is the most, well, all the pivots are important, but this is probably the toughest for most people because they're uncomfortable asking broad, open-ended questions. They feel like the customer's in a rush, so they don't want to ask them hard questions. They'll keep to the short questions, or they don't feel like whatever they're saying isn't important enough. They have an inferiority complex. So they don't feel like they're important enough to ask these broad and important questions, or they just don't know how to, or they're just in such a rush to give their presentation. They ask one or two quick questions and jump into the presentation. But I can tell you for a fact, this is the pivot that's going to make you money. This is how you open conversations. We talked in another workshop about your opening rate. These first two pivots are what's going to increase your opening rate. And all the opening rate means is you're having a good, down-to-earth, person-to-person conversation with a guy or a woman who's not trying to hang up on you. You've opened the conversation. They're giving you some information. They still may be resistant. They still may be hesitant. No problem. But as long as they're talking, they're releasing psychic energy, and you're winning because you're building a trust bond with them. Now, I don't know if you ever watched the Disney movie Moana, but she's a girl, I guess, from the movie. She's probably about 12 years old. And she finds this boat that her great-great-grandfather was hiding in a cave. And it's this, she's from Hawaii, and it's this Hawaiian boat. And she's not supposed to, but she like runs out into the ocean. She wants to just run away on this boat. And she runs out, and the big waves just crash her. So she starts running, and the first wave comes in and tumbles her around. She grabs the boat again. She runs again, and the waves just crash her. That is the first two pivots of the sales process. I'm not interested, and I'll give you a little bit of information, but I'm not going to give you a lot of information. So you crash against every customer you talk to. You have to expect that resistance. But here's the beauty of the pivot. Once you get past the first two pivots, it's all smooth sailing. There's no more choppy water because now you're talking human being to human being. They've released their psychic energy. Maybe not all of it. Surely they're, got things they're worried about that they're not going to share with you. But on this particular issue, they're opening up to you. They're releasing all their energy. They're releasing all their resistance, and you're building. And once that bond of trust forms, everything, the next three phases of the sale are all smooth sailing. Sales is difficult, especially for new people. This is where they get wiped out, just like the waves. I'm not interested. Call me back in a month. I'm not going to answer your questions. You called me. I don't feel like talking to you. It's not a priority for me. All of those impulsive resistance statements in the beginning, all of that negative psychic energy that you feel in the beginning, that's what wipes you out. When you get good at the first two pivots, and you find out, and you can on a regular basis, a few times a day, get through the surf and get out into the open water, it's all clear sailing because now you have a trust relationship with the customer. So I want to make you realize that these pivots are really, really important because it's the only way you're going to get to where you need to be. All right. So the third pivot is the second pivot. I was successful in getting them from answering small fact-finding questions to opening up with more value-oriented experience questions. How do you feel about things, etc.? This is where our listening skills come in. I'm not going to go off on a tangent here about listening because that's a whole, they could write books about that. But you have to learn how to allow the customer to release their psychic energy. And what that means is you have to empty yourself. You have to be an empathetic listener. Empathy means listening for the emotion. Gee, you sound frustrated by that experience. Or, wow, you seem upset that happened. Heck yeah, I'm upset. And they go on and on and on, even if they're complaining about you calling. Gee, it must be pretty frustrating to get all those phone calls. Heck yeah, it's frustrating, blah, 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 blah. Let them express their psychic energy, then open up to open-ended questions and learn to listen, ask questions, explore, key and pivot. I could go on and on about listening, and in the other workshops, they're well worth watching. You need to learn how to listen. So now you've thoroughly listened to the customer. The next pivot is into your presentation. So the customer is kind of telling you what their problem is. You're helping them explore the problem. Tell me more about this. You mentioned a minute ago about some quality problems. Tell me about quality problems. They tell you. Now you know everything you need to know. Now and again, this pivot is easy. You have to pivot from gathering information from them to now presenting. Maybe you're going to schedule an appointment for a presentation later or tomorrow. Maybe you're going to go right into your presentation now, depending on what your sale is. If you're selling at home, if you're, selling at home, I use the example all the time. I had a guy come in and do insulation, gave me a quote. And, I said, well, I'm just getting a quote. I'm going to get 5 quotes, blah, 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 very resistant, the whole thing. And he was perfect at it. He asked me some very simple questions. Then he asked me some broader questions. And then he asked me some broader questions. Then we went up in the attic and we looked at the insulation and he asked me more questions and more and more. And I realized I had a pretty serious problem up there. I didn't realize I had this problem. And so I was able to express this is the one sales guy that got me to really release everything. So of course he's the one that got the deal. So now you have to, once you get good at the first 2 pivots and you get good at listening, now you have to make the third pivot into your presentation. This is the easiest pivot of all. Here's what I do when I'm done asking questions, or I feel like it's time to move to the pivot. I say, well, you know what, Mr. Customer, you really filled in a lot of details for me. That makes your situation really clear. Or, you know what? Thank you so much for sharing with that. I wish all my customers would be so open and honest about their issues. It just makes life so much easier. Here's the pivot. Do you mind if I share some things that I think might help? Do you mind if I share what we're working on that I think would be help? Do you mind if I explain to you what we're working on? Just say, do you mind, or with your permission, do I have your permission to move to the next step? It's simple. This is the easiest pivot. The first 2 are the hardest. Does that make sense? Any questions to this point? The next pivot, the 4th pivot, is while you're giving your pitch, the customer is in one state of mind. And that state of mind is, I'm probably not going to buy this. Right? They feel like, okay, this is moving forward. He's going to ask me to buy something. And like, I'm going to listen to him, but that's all I'm going to do. Right? If you ever been on vacation and they suck you into a timeshare presentation, you'll listen to it, but you're like with your wife, you go in, don't say anything. We're not going to buy anything. Okay. And she nods yes. And because they're going to pick on her and all this stuff that we as salespeople do. So they're listening to your pitch, but in their mind, they're not buying yet. Your job during your presentation is to create interest in your product, to make them feel comfortable with you and the company, and to get them curious about how it's going to work for them. Interest, comfort, and curiosity. I believe, again, I think it was last week, I could be wrong about that. I gave a whole hour-long presentation about how to give an impactful presentation that sets you up for the close. And what we talked about there was using stories, enthusiasm, and value to build trust with the customer, certainty, and interest. Let me start with trust. Trust is the foundation of all sales. The customer psychologically cannot and will not buy from you if they don't trust you. Okay. Certainty means they have to be certain at the end of your presentation that if they shopped around for 1,000,000 years, they would never find anything better. They have to be absolutely certain, based on everything that you've said, that this is the best solution for them. And the only thing to do would be to move forward, because if they shop around, they'll just be wasting time. And third is interest. You have to develop an interest in what you're saying, and you have to develop curiosity. They have to ask questions. So a lot of times you'll be giving your presentation. And by the way, if you get this far, you're doing okay. Most people get into the presentation without really doing any of the other previous steps. They're just lucky that the person didn't hang up. There's something they said. They don't know what they said, but this guy didn't hang up. He answered my little baby questions. He gave me a zip code, the ages, and now I'm going to present my health insurance to him, right? So if you've gotten this far, congratulations. If you get better in sales, once you understand these pivot points and you have a plan for yourself to move forward, you will get to the presentation more and more often. And then you can start to really become an expert in your presentation. But you've got to develop curiosity. You're going to hear buying signs like, wow, that's really interesting. Huh, that could work for us. You hear all these buying signs. I didn't know that. All these buying signs. That's your job in your presentation, is to generate those little buying signals. Right? They don't even know they're saying it, but you're listening for the buying signals. As soon as you hit the point in your presentation where you've heard the buying signals, you know that they're qualified, you know that it's going to help them, you know that this is going to be a good thing for them, you know that this is going to change their life. Now you have to pivot to the close. But before you pivot to the close, you must get them to ask questions. If they don't ask, well, I'll explain in a minute. But the last pivot is pivoting from the presentation to the close. Okay. And I believe, yep. Okay. So you're giving the presentation, they're giving you the buying signs. This is interesting. This might work. I didn't know that. Wow, that's really cool. All those things that you hear people say, again, they're not even aware that they're saying it. They're giving you buying signs. But you cannot close on buying signals. You must close on questions. We only close on questions. So if the customer starts asking questions, that is wonderful. Why are questions important? Because questions mean that the customer is considering your product and is now checking off boxes. What would happen if, what's your return policy? Does it come in other colors? Can I, do I get a discount if I buy two? Anytime you hear a customer ask a question about your product or your service, that is not only a buying sign, but it's a closing sign. You want to always close on questions. And I have, again, a whole separate workshop where I talked about my favorite close, and it's a two-step close. The first step, you give your presentation, you hear the buying signs. When you're ready, you're going to set up the pivot. And the way you set up the pivot is, that's me doing a lot of talking. Now, of course, during the presentation, you weren't only talking, you were going back and forth, but this is what I say, that's me doing a lot of talking. What questions do you have for me? And I ask that. I do this pivot in these exact words because I want them to ask questions. Even if they've asked questions, I still ask this question. What questions do you have for me? They ask one question. That's a great question. Let me explain how that works. Does that make you feel more comfortable? Yeah. What other questions do you have for me? Oh, that's a good question too. I didn't cover that in my presentation. Let me explain how that works. Does that kind of tie it together for you? You see that? Then you're going to close. You're going to go right into your close. Well, look, we have a two-step process to get started. We do this, or a three-step process, whatever your process is. First, we do this, then we do this, then we do that. With your permission, let's go ahead and get step one started. It's called the permission close. It's the easiest close because after they start expressing their psychic energy, once they're talking to you, you're now on smooth waters. It's easy now to transition into your pitch, and it's easy to transition from your pitch into the close. These are the 5 pivot points of sales. They're very, very simple to understand. And the better you get at selling, the more you start seeing this stuff in slow motion, and you start knowing where you're at. You start feeling the resistance. And what you know is that they still have psychic energy they have to release. And when you feel that resistance, open the conversation give them an opportunity to ask questions or express themselves, or you ask them questions. Let them tell you more. So once you start to understand where you're at in the process, this becomes the whole sales process is much simpler. And again, salespeople get slaughtered because they have no idea of that there's even a process. None. They're just talking, and occasionally someone will listen to them. And of the people that listen to them, occasionally somebody buys. They have no rhyme or reason why it happened. They have no repeatable process. By understanding these pivot points and practicing them, as I've laid out in all these workshops, selling is actually relatively easy. This is a really important slide to understand, so I'm going to spend a minute on it. When you first meet a customer, let's say, for example, like this picture. Let's say that's me standing on the street, and inside the door is the sales mastermind. And people come walking by and they say, "Hey, what do you got? How much does it cost?" That's the first thing that they ask. I said, "Well, I'll certainly tell you that. Tell me more about you. What do you sell? And, what's your biggest challenge in sales? Blah, 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 blah." Right? I'm pivoting to open-ended questions. I have to deflect their desire to find out everything and to just get their quick answers and move on. I deflect their questions and go into my questions instead. That's the second pivot, right? That's okay. Yeah. Appreciate you asking those questions, and I'll get to it. Or I give them a 1-word answer. And then I say, but it would probably help me, before we go forward, by the way, I probably should ask, And then you ask an open-ended question, right? And I get into a conversation. What's going to prevent them from buying? Okay. It's $19 a month. What on earth would they not want to find out what's inside? The reason they don't want to find out what's inside is because they have false assumptions and buying fears. Oh yeah, I was in a mastermind group 25 years ago. It wasn't any good, blah, blah, blah. So they carry their false assumptions, or they're afraid. They're afraid, oh, it's $19 a month now, but once I get in, you're going to ask me for $1 million. They have fears and false assumptions. And the only way they're ever going to overcome those fears and false assumptions is by trusting you as the salesperson. And this is your customer talking to you about your thing. You're trying to explain to your customer all the benefits, but they're not really hearing all the benefits. All they're hearing in their mind are their fears and their false assumptions. Remember, I told you as you start your presentation, they're not sold. They're just saying, all right, I'll listen to what you have. And then they tell the wife, but we're not buying it, right? Okay, we're not buying it. But yeah, we'll listen to your presentation. Your job is to pivot, right? So what you have to do is somehow build a bond of trust that allows them to express all of their fears and allows them to express all of their past experiences and false assumptions. Because if they don't express them, if they don't release them, they're going to hold on to them and they'll never trust you. They'll never be able to go into the unknown. You know all the benefits of your product. You know how it's going to change your customer's life. You know how everyone else that you sold it to is really happy. You know all the good things in there, but they don't mean anything to your customer because the customer hasn't experienced those benefits for themselves. What they've experienced are dangerous, bad salespeople or dishonest companies or all the negative garbage that they carry in their minds. And they're laying that on you. Even though you're explaining how great it is, they still are stuck by their false assumptions and their buying fears. It's not until they experience your company that they too will start to understand all the benefits and say, yeah, this actually was a pretty good decision. I'm glad I did this. All those benefits that she was telling me about, it's all true. I never knew this even existed. I'm glad I trusted this person and moved forward. Now that I have the experience and I understand it, I can get all the benefit, right? The problem is that line in the middle. It's called the line of the unknown. No matter how good you are as a salesperson, it's still an unknown. It's still a risk for them to move forward because of the fears and assumptions. And maybe they still don't trust you. You have to appreciate the fact that customers have to go through a 5-step psychological process. Every one of them, from I wouldn't be interested in that, I already have somebody that helps me with that, to all right, I'll answer one of your questions, but go ahead and I still need to know what you have. I don't want to waste any time. And they have to go from that psychological state to opening up, releasing their psychic energy, telling you about all their problems, telling you about their hopes and dreams and wishes, all that good stuff, their fears, just let it all out. And then after that, pivot into the presentation and then get them to ask questions and pivot into the close. This is the simplest, most repeatable process to move people across the line of the unknown. You have to build trust by listening. And when you listen to people and let them express their psychic energy, you can now ask them to move forward with you. And this is really what this picture is about. As the words say, they're qualified, they want it, but people block themselves psychologically from making a commitment. So your job is to move people smoothly through the 5 pivots, the 5 psychological pivots, so that to the point that they don't even know they're being moved. It just feels natural. Okay, I answered a simple question. I gave you my zip code. Now tell me about your health insurance. Yeah, absolutely. I probably should ask you, what health insurance do you have now? How do you like it? What's most important to you? What have you had in the past? You ever had any medical problem? Whatever. Ask your open-ended questions. I hope that makes sense. You have to smoothly move them through each of the 5 pivots. Any questions before I jump into the next slide? Okay. And I'll leave, we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. All right. So what makes the Sales Mastermind Association special? Okay. We are an industry association. We don't really represent the industry because there's no such thing as the sales industry. It's like the Wild West. It's a free-for-all. Everybody gets whatever job they're lucky to get. And what we want to do is create a more positive narrative for the sales profession. The truth is we're looking out for the interests of our members, creating opportunities and jobs for our members. But at a higher level, outside to the outside world, Our job is to create a more positive narrative of the sales profession. And what I mean by this is, certainly over the last 10 years, but I think it goes back about 15 years, the sales industry has taken on a very negative reputation, almost dysfunctional, where people are just so aggressive, constantly pitching. Nobody listens to anybody anymore. Everybody's got an angle. Everybody's got a pitch. If someone's talking to you, believe me, they have some ulterior motive to talk to you. We want to shift that narrative where people just connect with one another, where we build bonds of trust, where we teach trust-based selling, basically, so that we learn to get along with people. And as salespeople, once you can get along with them, once you understand how to move them through their psychological steps, they'll always buy from you. Selling is just an easy thing if you can build trust. The second thing that we're doing now inside the mastermind, inside the members library, I'm capturing and preserving lots and lots of different sales skills. But the most important thing that I want to develop and preserve is the really important skill of listening and building trust. In our world today, those two words are basically extinct. Nobody trusts anybody for good reason, because everybody's got an angle, everybody's got a pitch, everybody's trying to sell you something, and we've kind of poisoned our own water. But we have to learn how to build trust with people. And we have to learn how to listen. And listening is easy to explain, but it's difficult to make internal changes in yourself, to become empty, to empathize, to learn how to ask good questions, to not interrupt, to not bring everything back to you, right? We make so many mistakes, and we can, inside the mastermind, we talk about listening all the time, but we want to preserve this skill, not just for salespeople, because salespeople, when they go home, here's something, if you're a lousy listener in your sales job, then you're a lousy listener with your kids, you're a lousy listener with your husband or your wife. You don't turn it on and turn it off. You don't just all of a sudden you're a terrible listener at home and a great listener at work. It doesn't work that way. Listening is an internal skill. It requires internal change, and it represents, the way you listen to people represents how you value other human beings. Do you value them enough to listen to them? Do you respect them enough to listen to them? Or is it always all about you? Yeah, okay, you answered one question. Now let me tell you about my presentation. Okay, good. That was enough about you. Let's talk about me. Listening is the opposite. It's the art of emptying yourself. Easy to explain, very difficult to do over time. I'm from New York, love to talk, hated to listen, never listened to anybody in my whole life. It's just the way I was brought up. So for me, it's been a decades-long struggle. The more I listen, the more money I make in sales. Because as soon as you listen, that's the foundation for trust. Once they trust me, smooth sailing, they'll almost certainly buy from me. Why wouldn't they? Because they trust me, they like me, I listen to them, I did a good job for them. So our job in the association is to preserve this skill, to expand it, preserve it, and promote it. What we're seeing right now, the association will always provide free, high-quality sales training to anybody in the world. Anybody in the world can log in here and be in these live workshops. I post all of the workshops on YouTube. That's obviously free. I'm creating a library of these workshops. I don't believe that 350 million salespeople, of which 340 million are struggling, the 10 million are doing great. I'm not worried about them. It's the 340 million people on this planet who have to sell for a living, who don't know how, and it's very high stress, and they constantly are running into the surf and in the waves. Their boat is getting dumped. I want to teach them how to get out into clear water, and I don't think people should have to pay to learn how to sell. I don't think anybody should have a trademark or a copyright on it. Selling is I believe it's a human right. I believe learning how to sell is as much a right as learning how to read. I think every human being should learn how to read and get an education. I also believe that if you want to, anybody in the world should learn how to sell so that they can make a living and support their family. I'm just so happy. So when a new salesperson comes in and they're struggling, they need a check, 3, 4, 5 months later, they got some cash in their pocket. They can take their girlfriend out to a movie and dinner. You feel it just uplifts you as a human being. And I would never want to charge people for that. I have a membership program, which is all different. We talk about other things, which is the next bullet. For our members, which you don't have to be a salesperson to be a member of our association, we want to help you explore the full power of mind to uncover abundance on your life path. I wrote another book called The Cycle of Mind. And that's in the membership area, is where we talk about subconscious training, and all, we focus on listening, building trust, changing you from the inside, turning you into a different person. So with that, I want to say I appreciate it. And again, I always strive to make the most use of every minute that we're here. So I will open it up for Q&A, comments, questions, no topic off limits.
Hey, Alan.
Yeah. Hey, that's Scott. Hey, Scott.
Yes, I've got a question. Say I'm calling businesses from a list for health insurance and I get through to the decision maker. What would be my first 10-second introduction to try to get an appointment?
Yeah. So I'm not a big fan. You have to have a nice 10-second introduction, but your 10-second introduction is not the point. The point is what they say next, right? They're going to say, yeah, we already have somebody that does that. They wouldn't be interested in that, right? Is that usually what happens to you?
Right.
Yeah. So that's all you're looking for. That's your starting point, right? And make your opening thing 7, 8, 10, 12 seconds, no more than 15 seconds. That's too long, because all they're going to do is tell you they're not interested. They already have somebody for that.
So just try to get to their first negative thing. I don't have time.
You just get them to tell you they're not interested, and then you do the jujitsu flip. That's exactly why I'm calling. Most people don't realize they have choices with their health insurance. Blah, 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 blah. We can save more doctors, less money, blah, blah, blah. Bullet 1, bullet 2, a story. How many employees do you have? Just ask them a closed, simple question that's not personal. A lot of people ask, like, what's your birthday or what's your social security number? That's a terrible question to ask because that's very personal. Having said that, if they give you their birthday and their social security number, somehow they trust you in a short period of time, which isn't a bad thing. But I always ask, what's your age? Because yeah, I'm 41. I don't want to know your birthday. I don't want to know your personal information. I just want to get you a quote, right? So yeah, that's exactly, Scott, you're not interested? Yeah, what a shock. You're the first person that told me that today. That's exactly why I'm calling. Most people don't realize blah, 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 blah. It's this pivot that's important, not the script.
Thank you.
That makes sense?
It sure does. You want to get into the 5 pivots. I mean,
well, that's your first pivot. That's your most important pivot. That's where the waves are crashing on you.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what to say, which 99% of salespeople don't, and they just turn over every 2 weeks, there's 5 new people there, where the boss is promising they're going to make $1 million. And every 2 or 3 weeks, there's, 5 new people. Who are you? Oh, I just showed up. They don't understand. They're just going to get crashed on the waves. But the waves are going to come, whether you're an experienced salesperson or brand new. What your experience should say, that you should know exactly what to say when they tell you, I'm not interested, or call me back in 6 weeks, or whatever it might be. That's the key. It's that's the pivot. I call it the jujitsu flip. You're not interested? Oh, that's exactly why I'm calling. So let's talk about this. What's your zip code? And they give me the information and I'm in. The conversation's now open.
Yeah.
Get them to answer a very narrow question. Pivot, jujitsu flip. That's exactly why I'm calling. Bullet 1, bullet 2, story, and ask them a very narrow question.
So what do you do if they push back on that?
Yeah, you can't close everyone, right? So when you cold call, you're going to get washed out, right? The canoe's going to swamp a lot of times. That's okay. You just got to keep going. If they don't, I mean, what would they say? What do you mean? They don't want to give me their zip code, or they don't want to tell me their electric bill?
Any kind of pushback.
Yeah. So then you just try again, take another swing at it, and hang up the phone and move on, dial the next one.
Fair enough.
Yeah. The goal is to open the conversation. You're not going to sell anything until you open a conversation, until they express all of their issues, all of their needs, all of their wants and desires and problems and fears. That's the goal. If I can't get to that point, I can't make the sale. But knowing what to say, being prepared with that pivot will get me there a lot better than the new guy who just showed up and they stuck him on the poor dialer. And I'm like, dude, can I give you some advice? and it's hard, this is by far the hardest part of selling, is getting past the initial resistance. I don't care who they are, how famous they are, how big their Lamborghini or their private jet is. If I want to answer their questions, they can't sell me if I refuse to engage. So the goal is maybe say something funny. And again, you have to do it within your personality. I'm very mechanical person. I'm not, I'm not, super friendly or joking around. I'm not a jokey kind of a person, but there are some people who use that to their advantage. but it's the same thing. Yeah, I know you're not interested. Isn't that funny? Nobody told me that today, Frank. You're the first person that told me they're not interested. How come you're not interested? And all of a sudden you're joking around with them. It's another way to get past, you got to get past the waves. And if you find a way within your personality to get past the waves, it's all smooth sailing. And it really is smooth sailing, because once they start talking to you, we're in. Then I've got a whole different set of skills, but those are easier than dealing with this constant negative resistance.
Right.
I used to think of myself like, you know, that the guy at the car dealership, the guy, the wind machine, and the guy's just flopping around. I try to have like whatever they tell me, I just, oh, okay, yeah, that's exactly why I'm calling. I just let them resist me, and I just don't give them any resistance. And, you know, and then if they answer the question, now I'm just doing something I've done 10,000 times before. You know, I probably should ask you, what is your, you know, deepest fear about whatever it is I'm selling? You know, I can ask them deep, deep questions. Once they start answering little baby questions, the next pivot is to open it up to big, important questions. All right, next week on Tuesday, we're going to do some role play. So when you come here, just be ready. I might, you know, put you in the cannon and shoot you. I'm going to tell you I'm not interested. You're going to tell me what to say. So please watch look, you're in sales. If you take your profession seriously, which all of you do because you're all here and you're spending the time here, take the time to watch the other workshops. I know it's 30, 40 minutes. I get that. It's not everybody's favorite format. People just want an Instagram meme, you know, to get better. It just really does. It's a subject like any other study. If you're studying to be a pilot, you would have to know how to handle 10,000 different situations. You got to study, read the books, practice, get in the flight simulator, get in a real plane. It's the same thing as a salesperson. You have to be you have to just work at it. You have to prepare yourself for every single instance. And that's what we're going to start doing next Tuesday. We're going to actually do some role playing. I'm going to play the easy customer, the difficult customer. You guys can sell to yourself. I'll give you a little secret messages, you know, that you're protecting, you know, don't tell him it's this, you know, make him ask the questions. So we can get better. And watching other people succeed makes you more successful. Watching other people fail makes you more successful, and it makes them more successful. So participate next week, get involved, and we'll do some more less PowerPoint and more role playing.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah, sure, David. Thanks for being here, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I had to get something to eat, so I didn't want to force everybody to watch me eating. But so you just mentioned something you just mentioned a moment ago made me think of a question. Why is it that we as salespeople think that this should be easy? What is it about the psychology that I thought I would be more successful in the times that I had been actively in sales, which I'm now refocusing on after a while away. But I know when I'm doing some kind of I was driving for my own company for a while. I'm not thinking about sales. It's not that side of the brain. I'm thinking about how do I get the I-35 and 94 as quick as possible so I can head to Chicago. And that's not anything to do with sales, but it seems like, I know I've heard this from other people, we think that it should be easier.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because sales isn't something that's ever presented on television or in movies. They show how police do their job. They show how nurses and doctors do their job. They show you how lawyers do their job and judges do their job. All these TV shows, they explain how everyone does their job. You've never seen a TV show that shows you actually, I'd like to start a TV show like, like who's going to get kicked off the island today, sales competitions. That would be, I think, very entertaining because these guys would swagger in. I sold $12 million worth of cars last year. I'm the best. I'm the baddest ass. And they're going to, all of a sudden you ask them, to sell, raffle tickets for the local charity. And they're like, oh, will you buy my, all of a sudden they can't sell that. So I think first of all, to answer your first question, I believe that all of us, especially those of us in salespeople, have a little bit of swagger. You should have a little bit of swagger. You have confidence in yourself. I've done everything else. How hard can this be? Let's go play golf. How hard could golf be? I see everyone doing it on TV. How hard can it be? Right? Wasn't that easy? Because the very first shot, you got to go chase it in the woods. Next shot. And you know what I'm talking about. It's the same thing with sales. If you've never done it, You have no frame of reference. So what you really need, and what this organization is a giant coach. You need a coach to correct you. You need to constantly practice. You need to read about it, watch videos, immerse yourself in different objection handling techniques, not just what I say, but what everyone says. Grab little pieces. I would just caution you, as you explore all the materials that are out there, focus on selling from a positive mindset. The people that tell you buyers are liars, they're all lying, just turn that channel off. That is a terrible way to think. You have to learn to do trust-based selling. You have to learn to listen and trust-based selling, which is the harder way to sell, by the way, because it requires you have to change yourself. You have to change the way, not only the way you think, but the way you talk, the way you act, the way you breathe. Everything about you has to be different as a listener than as a talker. So I would just say, study, read books, all that stuff. But the truth is, books, videos, workshops do not change who you are. You got to go out in the field. You got to get in the ring and get knocked out and get knocked out again and make it to the second round. It's like a video game. You come out, you get shot. You learn, okay, the guy's there. I can't do that. Then you got to do this, that. Then you make it to level 2. And then level 2, you start level 2, boom, you get shot in the first 3 seconds, because level 2 is different. That's what you're doing. You're playing a video game. You're trying to get yourself further and further and further down the path of psychological understanding. And the more you do it, the more you start to realize everyone's different, but everyone's exactly the same. And I say they're exactly the same because they all have to go through 5 psychological shifts, from I'm not interested to, okay, I'll give you 1 second. I'll give you 1 second to, okay, I'll tell you my problem. And they start answering, okay, I'll listen to what you have. And then curiosity, tell me more about that. And then they're closed. As soon as they ask questions, close them. And if you don't know that, and no one explains it to you, that's why it's free, but how many people are here? I wish, there were 10 people here. I wish there were 10 million people here, because I would just want nothing. I want more in the world than for salespeople to stop suffering. It's easy for me because I've been around the block. I've been through those 5 cycles, and I've kind of narrowed it down to this very specific things I say. If it goes off script, no problem for me. I can go off script, but not everybody can do that. So you have to build it's like my kids playing baseball. When they were 8 years old, 7 and 8 years old in the Little League, they're throwing the ball over the outfield, they're laughing, they're joking around. 4 years later, they're playing in All-Stars. They're playing real baseball. This takes time. It takes time to build the skill. Most people that are here are already somewhat good at it. They have a grounding, but they have a lot of bad habits. They don't know how to listen. They're uncomfortable asking questions. Well, those 2 things right there would flip everything around for you. If you were to get better at asking questions, if you would to get better at listening, everything will be so much easier for you. That's why I say that's the key to selling, is listening. That's the one thing. If you can change everything else, but if you're still a bad listener, it's going to be very hard to sell people, because they're holding on to their psychic energy and you're not listening. And we talked about this yesterday in the members meeting. Somebody tells you, oh, we experienced quality problems in our manufacturing facility. Okay. So he's about to let go of everything. And you say, quality problems? You won't have any quality problems with our widget. Let me show you how we do it. And you cut them off you didn't listen, instead of allowing them to release their psychic energy. But I think that we all think we're going to, I walk onto a golf, I think I'm going to be great. It ain't that easy. Selling ain't that easy. You got to work at it. And the people that do become good, they start at golf, they suck. 6 months later, they golf, they go to the driving range every day, and they do make themselves better. It's the same thing with sales, except we don't really understand it. It's not explained to us. We're in very high pressure, negative situations, and no one's really nurturing us or helping us. And that's my goal here for this group, is I just want to get you better. Whatever you need from me, I'll give you. If you need this, I'll help you with that. If you need that, I'll help you with this. Whatever you need. We just want to be an organization that you can come to, bond with, you can trust us, and all we want to do is help you. Thank you, Randy H. Appreciate that comment. All right, so I'm about at time. Any last minute requests? All right, I will see you guys in a week, and be ready for some to get a little role play.